Good morning. This is Samiullah Khan, selection grade lecturer from Government Giridhar Ram Narayan Institute of Commercial Practice, SJP Campus, Bangalore. In this session, I will try to explain the subject Company Law and Secretarial Practice. Under this, the first chapter, Company Secretary. In this session, we can discuss about the introduction, the background of the company law, meaning of secretary and company secretary, the different types of secretary, definition of secretary, and company secretary. This session is meant with an object to acquire the knowledge of company law and secretarial practice. To acquire the knowledge and understanding the origin, meaning, definition of secretary and company secretary. Now this session starts with introduction. With the growth in the size of business in modern business world, it is almost impossible for all entrepreneur to carry on day-to-day administrative work single-handedly. The businessman has to learn heavily on the secretary performance of the day-to-day administrative work. A modern business has to comply with the several legal provisions or requirements. To ensure the strict compliance with the legal provisions, the presence of secretary is quite essential. The work of company secretary begins with the formation of the company and ends with the liquidation of the company. Therefore, we can say that now the company secretary plays a most important role in the business. The next comes to the background of the Companies Act. Now, in this background, we can learn when the Companies Act came into an existence. Now, the history of Indian company law began with the Companies Act of 1850, modeled on British Companies Act of 1844. During the British period, the Britishers has introduced in India an Indian Companies Act. Now this act is based purely on the British Companies Act of 1844. In India, this act continues till 1930. Then later, the Indian Companies Act of 1930 was based on the British Companies Act of 1908. This act will continue with or without amendments, with various amendments till independence. After the independence, it was found that the company law should again amended. On the basis of the points of recommendations, the parliamentary committee, the parliament passed a new act in November 55, which received the president assent, the president permission on 18 January 1956. Therefore, the Indian Companies Act of 1956 came with effect from April 1956. This act, the Indian Companies Act of 1956, consists of 658 sections and schedules. It also helps the growth of the companies on healthy business principles. After a long run of 56 years of Indian Companies Act of 1956 is now in the process of being substituted by a new law. Therefore, the new Companies Bill 2012 was approved by the Lok Sabha on 18 December 2012. The same has been approved by Rajya Sabha on 9th August 2013. On 29th August 2013 to become the law. Now this law is called as Indian Companies Act of 2013. This Indian Companies Act of 2013 consists of 470 sections and 7 schedules as against 658 sections and 14 schedules in Indian Companies Act of 1956. Now this is the background of the company. Thereafter comes to the next concept is the meaning of secretary. Now the word secretary is a birth from a Latin word called secretarius. Now each word has its own origin. Some word has derived from a Latin, French, and some word has derived from a different origin. Similarly, the word secretary is derived from a Latin word which means secretarius, derived from a Latin word secretarius, which refers to a confidential officer. Therefore, we can say the secretary is a person who handles the confidential matters. Comes to the next definition of the secretary. The secretary is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as one whose office is to write for another, especially one who is employed to conduct the correspondence, to keep records, and to transact various other business for other persons or for the society, corporation, or public body. Now this is the definition given by the Oxford Dictionary. According to this definition, it says that the company secretary is a person who has to write the correspondence. The main work of the secretary is the correspondence work. He has to make the correspondence work, keep the records, and transact the various businesses with the other persons. The other persons may be the individual persons, the other persons may be the society, trust, club, corporations, or a public body. From these definitions, it is clear that the secretary is a person who is employed to conduct the correspondence in connections with the business on behalf of the company. The work of the secretary includes the correspondential work, keeping of records, maintenance of the records, conducting of the meetings, and etc. Now this person is called as secretary. Now comes to the next concept is the types of secretaries. The secretary consist of the various types. The secretary may be a private secretary. The secretary may be a secretary of a club or an association, secretary of a cooperative society, the secretary of a government department, the secretary of a local body, the secretary of a trade union, the secretary of a joint stock company. That is, we can call a company secretary. Comes one by one. The first one is a private secretary. He is appointed by an person such as a member of a parliament, a manager, a businessman, or any busy person. His work is to do the correspondence and other personal work, official work of the employer. He has to perform the duties of a private nature, such as handling the bank transactions, arranging the meetings, drafting the reports, and drafting the speeches. That person is called as a private secretary. Therefore, we can say the private secretary refers to a person who is appointed by an individual. The work of the secretary is to maintain the correspondence and helps the employer in handling of the bank transaction, arranging of the meetings, drafting of the reports and speeches. Now comes to the next one, secretary of a club or an association. They can appoint a full-time secretary to conduct the day-to-day activities of a club, association or a trade union. The important functions which is performed by a secretary of a club are as follows: to attend the administrative correspondence, maintenance of accounts and records, supervision of staffs, arranging for audit of accounts, to conduct the activities of club or association such as registration of new members, collection of fees, etc. Next, to convey the meeting of the members, to prepare the required documents and minutes of the meeting, to advise the managing committee on various matters relating to association, to execute the decision of a managing committee. Now that person is a secretary of a club or an association. Next one, the secretary of a cooperative society. The cooperative society also can appoint a secretary. That secretary is called as the secretary of a cooperative society. The full-time cooperative society secretary is appointed in some cases. One of the members of the managing committee may be elected as a full-time secretary of a cooperative society. The functions of a secretary of cooperative society are as follows: to assist the managing committee in managing the affairs of the society, to execute the decisions taken by the managing committee, to maintain proper records and registers, to arrange the meetings and attend the conferences on behalf of the society. Now this is the functions which is performed by a secretary of a cooperative society. The next one, the secretary of a government department. The government has several departments. Each department is headed by a secretary. Now, each department of the government is under the control of the secretary. For an example, secretary of a finance department, secretary of a education department, secretary of a social welfare department, secretary of a personal department, etc. Now, the secretary of such departments may be an executive head or an advisor to the ministers who is concerned with the particular department. The functions performed by these secretaries are as follows: administrative and executive functions such as overall control and day-to-day administration of the office, guide the subordinate officer of the department, coordinate the various activities of the department, advising the functions, which is advising the ministers on all the matters regarding supplying whatever information is needed by the minister. Now, these are all the various functions which is performed by the secretary of a government department. The next secretary is the secretary of local bodies. The local bodies, nothing but the municipals, corporation, panchayats, etc. Now, in Bangalore, we can call it as a BBMP. Now, BBMP is a local body. In town level, now it is called as municipal corporations. In village level, the panchayats. Now, these are all comes under the local bodies. The municipal corporations, the panchayats, appoint a paid secretary who will function as an office executive. He is act as a link between the authorities and the staff. He can supervise and coordinate all the activities of the staff, prepare budgets, statement, arrange meetings, and draft the minutes. Now, this is the various things which a secretary of a local body has to perform. Comes to the next one, a secretary of a trade union. Generally, every trade union appoints a secretary. The secretary of a trade union is required to hold the meeting of the union, record their proceedings, maintain accounts and statutory books, conduct correspondence on behalf of the union, advise union on various matters relating to labors. In case of the disputes, the secretary of a trade union negotiate with the employees on behalf of the laborers and makes the efforts to stop the disputes between the employer and the employees. Now, these are all the various types of the secretary. Last but not least is a secretary of a joint stock company. Nothing but we can call as a company secretary. Now, this company secretary we have to discuss detailedly. Comes to the first, the meaning of the company secretary. A company secretary is an individual appointed to perform the duties of a company according to the Companies Act of 1956. In other words, the secretary is an important officer of the company who is appointed to perform the ministerial administrative duties. The secretary has to become an almost indispensable essential person in trade, industry and other social institution. Now comes to the definition of a company secretary. Under section 2, subsection 45 of Indian Companies Act of 1956 defines a company secretary as a person who is appointed to perform the duties which may be performed by a secretary under this act. Nothing but this act means the Companies Act of 1956. This definitions highlights that the secretary has to appoint by a company who has to perform the various duties which comes under the Companies Act of 1956. 2006. Then next, according to the Companies Amendment Act of 1974, defines a company secretary as any individual possessing the prescribed qualification, a member of Institute of Company Secretaries. Therefore, this definition highlights the basic qualification, the statutory qualification, such as he is a member of Institute of Company Secretaries. This is the basic qualification required to be appointed as a company secretary. Now, from this definition, we can come to a conclusion that the secretary, company secretary, means an individual who is entrusted with such function as keeping all records, conducting all correspondence, keeping secrets or confidential matters, writing minutes, and also performing all other functions as are entrusted to him by his employer. His employer is nothing but the company. He acts as a public relation officer of the company. That is, he acts as a bridge between management and the staff, well as outsiders. This is the concept regarding the company secretary. Therefore, we can say the secretary is most important officer. He holds the most important position in the company. Now, after this comes to the next, the multiple choice questions. Now, these questions tries to test your knowledge about what we have learned in this session. Now comes to the first question. The word secretary is derived from dash word. A Dutch word, French word, Latin word, Italian word. Students, shall you guess? Already we have discussed about this. Yes, it is derived from a Latin word. The answer is C, Latin word. Comes to the next question. The word secretary is derived from the word dash secretarius. Secretarius. Here, only the spells is mistaken here. Now, the answer for this question is option A, secretarius. Comes to the next question. The secretarius means A, strict officer, B, legal officer, C, confidential officer, D, tax officer. The answer is yes, no doubt, it is a confidential officer. Secretarius means a confidential officer. Next question. Secretary must be confidential officer, writer, option C, administrator, option D, all of the above. What is the answer, students? Yes, the answer is all of the above, option D. Secretary is a confidential officer. Secretary is a writer. He writes the letters. He makes the correspondence. He is an administrator. Therefore, the option D, all of the above, is a correct answer. A company secretary is appointed under the Companies Act of option A, 1950, option B, 1956, option C, 1990, option D, 2010. Yes, what is the correct answer, students? Yes, my dear student, the correct answer is option B, the Companies Act of 1956. Then comes to the next question. A company secretary has to be a firm or a body corporate. A company secretary may be a registered with a SEBI. SEBI means Securities Exchange Board of India. Next option, persons with a desired professional degree. Next option, the part of any secretary agency. Yes, what is the answer, my dear student? Yes, the answer is the C, person with a desired professional degree. As such, we have discussed in the meaning and definition. Now, the secretary should be a member of Institute of Company Secretary of India. Therefore, a person with a desired professional degree can become a company secretary. The next question is, company secretary performs the functions on behalf of the board of directors. Company secretary can be appointed by the board of directors on behalf of the company. Therefore, the company secretary has to perform the functions on behalf of the board of directors. The answer for this is whether it is a true or false. This statement is true or false. What is the answer, my dear student? Yes, it is true. Option A is a correct answer. Comes to the next 8th question. A company secretary guides about. Option A, accounts. Option B, meeting and minutes. Option C, drafting agenda. Option D, all of the above. What is the answer, my dear students? Yes, no doubt the answer is all of the above. Company secretary guides about the accounts, meetings, recording of the minutes, drafting of the agenda. Therefore, all of the above is a right answer. The next question is, company secretary is not required to have a prescribed qualification. He must have only sound qualities. Whether it is true or false. What is the answer, my dear students? Yes, the answer is the secretary not required to have a prescribed qualification. The answer for this question is false. He should have a prescribed qualification which is mentioned in the Companies Act of 1956. Therefore, this statement is false. Comes to the last question. The company secretary is appointed to perform purely a ministerial and administrative duties. Whether this is true or false. What is the answer, my dear student? Yes, it is true. He has appointed to perform the all ministerial and administrative activities. After this, our outcomes of the session. Now the outcome is the learner, nothing but, my dear students, you should get introduced to the concept of the secretary and the definition of company secretary. You should analyze and apply the provisions of company law regarding the meeting and definition of the company secretary. Yes, these are all the books of references I have referred for the explanation of this concept. Okay, my dear students, that's all. Thank you. I hope you can understand